They claimed my 30-foot fishing boat was an eyesore that violated their precious neighborhood standards. What they didn't realize was that I owned the entire 47-acre lake their luxury homes were built around.
Picture this.
I'm Garrett Stone, 52, retired marine engineer, just trying to enjoy a quiet morning coffee when this woman marches down my dock like she's the landlord of the universe. The sharp snap of her designer heels against sun-bleached planks. The sharp scent of overpriced perfume clashing with the clean lake breeze. She shoves a certified letter toward my chest, 72 hours to remove my boat or face $500 a day fines. This is our community now, she sneered, gesturing toward those oversized mansions. Your little pastime has to go. The sheer nerve made my coffee taste bitter. But then I remembered something buried deep in my grandfather's old paperwork. Something that would force her to swallow every arrogant word she'd just thrown at me. What would you do if your HOA tried controlling land they didn't even own? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Revenge tastes best when served with airtight documentation. Let me give you the full picture. 3 years ago, cancer took my wife, Sarah. The kind of battle that drains your accounts and fractures your spirit. This 30-foot Catalina, Sarah's dream, was meant to be our retirement escape. Instead, it became my floating sanctuary. The only place I could process losing the love of my life without completely falling apart. The lake, Crystal Lake, 47 acres of glass-clear water surrounded by towering oaks and the occasional deer wandering down for a drink. I inherited this slice of paradise from my grandfather back in 1987, starting with a modest cabin on 2 acres that slowly expanded as I bought neighboring parcels. After selling my marine consulting firm for a comfortable 7-figure payout, I could afford to live simply but comfortably. Then came Willowbrook Estates. Imagine 24 massive houses sprouting around the shoreline like luxury mushrooms after rain.
Average price tag, $1. $2 million.
Average owner, tech executives and wealthy retirees who moved here for the waterfront dream, somehow forgetting someone was already living it. Enter our antagonist, Veronica Hartwell, 58, former corporate attorney with the warmth of an IRS audit. She relocated from California, paid $1.44 million for her lakefront palace, and immediately crowned herself HOA president. Always flawless, like a real estate catalog come to life, designer outfits, immaculate hair, and a white Tesla that never saw a speck of dust. Her husband Richard, commercial real estate shark who treated every conversation like a hostile acquisition. Together they were the type of couple who probably scheduled arguments in Outlook. The morning of the confrontation, I'm sitting on my dock watching sunrise turn the water molten gold. Steam curling off my coffee. Gentle waves tapping the hull. The sweet scent of honeysuckle drifting from Sarah's old garden patch.
Peaceful, you know?
Then I hear those heels clicking down the dock like a metronome set to entitlement.
Mr. Stone.
Veronica Hartwell, HOA president.
No handshake.
Just authority radiating off her like a scented police siren. We need to discuss your watercraft situation. Good morning to you too, I replied, staying seated.
What situation?
She snapped open a burgundy binder thick as a phone directory. Community watercraft standards clearly state no vessels exceeding 25 feet. Your boat violates established regulations.
I almost laughed.
Ma'am, that boat's been here longer than your neighborhood. Times change, Mr. Stone. Her smile could have chilled whiskey. We have standards now. Property values to protect. The heavy thud of that binder hitting my dock table felt like she was delivering commandments from Mount Suburbia. Page after page of rules, boat colors, dock materials, even approved fishing hours. This is America, lady. I can keep my boat on my own property. Actually, she replied, adjusting her designer sunglasses, the community waterway usage agreement supersedes individual claims. We've consulted legal counsel. 48 hours later, the certified letter arrived, complete with intimidating legal letterhead. Morrison & Associates, the kind of firm that probably charged $500 just to say hello.
The demand was blunt.
Remove the boat within 72 hours or face escalating fines starting at $500 per day, jumping to $1,000 after 30 days. But here's the real punch. They'd already filed preliminary lien paperwork at the courthouse. These people weren't bluffing. They were playing for blood. Buck Martinez down at the marina pulled me aside that afternoon, his weathered face grim. Garrett, they've been asking about your registration, insurance, even environmental compliance. This isn't about boat size, man. A metallic taste filled my mouth as I realized the scale of their plan. They weren't just trying to relocate my boat. They were trying to relocate me. What they didn't know, Granddad hadn't just left me property. He'd left me something more valuable. The patience that comes from knowing you're holding every card while everyone else thinks they're running the table. Day 3, and Veronica wasn't slowing down. I'm barely into my first coffee when I hear tires crunch in my driveway.
Process server, 6 a.m. Sharp, with a stack of legal documents thick enough to prop open a door.
Morrison and Associates had escalated to DEFCON 1. The cease and desist read like a declaration of war. My boat was now labeled a navigational hazard. An environmental risk. They demanded a $15,000 impact study, at my expense of course, plus immediate removal pending results. That's when my engineering background kicked in. Years of contract reading taught me something most people miss. HOA bylaws can't override established property rights without proper legal procedure. They were bluffing with fancy stationery, hoping I'd fold. But Veronica was only getting started. That evening she called an emergency HOA meeting. And let me tell you, that woman could sell ice in Antarctica. She stood there with charts and graphs claiming my boat leaked fuel and threatened wildlife. Mr. Stone's vessel, she announced dramatically, poses an immediate danger to our lake's delicate ecosystem. The stale smell of the community center mixed with nervous perspiration as neighbors shifted in their seats. Veronica had printed glossy pamphlets, "Preserve Our Lake's Beauty," complete with stock photos of oil-covered ducks that definitely didn't come from Crystal Lake. 18 of the 24 homeowners signed her petition. Not because they believed her nonsense, but because she'd spent weeks whispering about property values dropping if the situation continued. Fear motivates people like nothing else. By Thursday, the local paper ran a headline, "Lake Community Battles Boat." The reporter clearly copied Veronica's press release.
No one called me for comment.
While she played politics, I did something more useful, research. Friday morning found me at the county courthouse digging through HOA formation records like a bloodhound chasing scent. The elderly clerk, Emma Kowalski, recognized my last name instantly. "Stone, your grandfather filed something important here in 1962. Might still be in the archive basement." 3 hours later, dusty, sneezing from decades-old paper, I struck gold.
Original surveys.
Deed transfers. And something that made
my pulse spike.
Property boundaries extending 200 feet farther into the lake than I'd ever realized. Granddad had been smarter than I knew. But while I was discovering hidden ownership, Veronica's crew got creative with intimidation. I came home to orange safety cones surrounding my dock. Bright yellow warning signs appeared overnight. Hazardous watercraft.
Proceed with caution.
The plastic flapping in the evening breeze sounded like mocking laughter. Then Richard Hartwell made his move. He called my insurance company directly. My agent Jim Patterson, guy I'd known 15 years, sounded uncomfortable when he phoned. "Garrett, I'm getting complaints labeling your property a community hazard. Corporates asking about liability exposure."
"What complaints?"
"Safety violations, environmental threats, neighbor disputes." "Look, I don't buy it, but if this escalates they might cancel coverage." That's when it hit me, this wasn't about a boat. They were trying to make life miserable enough that I'd sell and leave. Classic HOA strategy. Death by 1,000 documents. But they made one critical mistake. They assumed I was just some stubborn old man clinging to a hobby. During my consulting years, I'd learned something valuable from a water rights dispute in Colorado. Transparency laws are powerful if you know how to use them. So I filed a Freedom of Information request for all HOA communications with county officials. Cost me nothing. Gave me everything. The emails were beautiful. Veronica had promised the county planning board the boat issue would be resolved quickly as part of development approval. She'd guaranteed my removal before even speaking to me. Sunday evening, I'm sitting on my dock watching sunset when young Tommy Anderson from next door rides up on his bike. "Mr. Stone, my mom says I shouldn't talk to you, but I think your boat is awesome."
"Thanks, Tommy."
"Your mom's just scared." "Scared of what?" "Out of the mouths of kids, right?" What were they scared of? A widower who just wanted to fish in peace. That night I discovered my dock lines had been loosened. Not cut, too obvious, just loosened enough that Sarah's dream drifted into shallow water by morning. The scraping fiberglass against rocks made me want to find Veronica and have a very different kind of conversation.
But patience, Garrett. Patience.
Because I'd uncovered something in those archives that was about to flip this entire situation upside down. Something that would make Veronica's environmental accusations look trivial. Monday morning brought fresh nightmares. I woke to find Sarah's dream listing slightly to starboard. Someone had cut the dock lines overnight and she drifted into the shallows. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sharp, acrid smell of diesel fuel mixing with lake water. They'd punctured my fuel tank. Not enough to sink her, just enough to create a thin slick that would photograph perfectly for their environmental damage storyline. The oily rainbow shimmering across the surface caught the morning sunlight like proof of my supposed negligence. By 9 a.m., an EPA inspector was standing on my dock. Anonymous complaint about illegal fuel discharge. The inspector, a worn-out-looking guy named Dave, seemed more irritated than alarmed. "Mr. Stone, I'm required to investigate every report, but between us, this looks like sabotage, not carelessness. Can you put that in your report? I can note the fuel line appears to have been cut with a sharp tool. Beyond that," he shrugged apologetically. While Dave documented everything, Veronica was holding court at the community center. Her voice carried across the water as she ran yet another emergency meeting about installing safety barriers around the public boat launch.
Public boat launch.
On my property. The sharp crack of hammers echoed across the lake as contractors drove posts into the ground for what Veronica called protective barriers. A nice name for a fence meant to block my access to my own shoreline. That afternoon brought another legal surprise, a certified letter demanding my presence at a Lake Restoration Committee hearing. Apparently, they'd created an official sounding group to study water quality concerns. The kind of bureaucratic theater designed to exhaust ordinary people until they just give up. But I'd learned something during years of government contract work. Paper trails cut both ways. Back in my consulting career, I'd helped a client fight a similar dispute in Oregon. A developer claimed water rights they'd never actually purchased. We beat them by tracing original land surveys back to territorial grants. History becomes a weapon when you know how to use it. So Tuesday I dove deeper into those 1962 archives Emma had shown me. What I uncovered made my coffee go cold. The original lake wasn't natural. Crystal Lake had been created in 1954 during a dam project, and my grandfather owned the land before it was flooded. The government paid him $12,000 for temporary flooding rights, but the mineral rights and water rights stayed with our family permanently. Wednesday brought escalation from every direction. My mailbox overflowed with certified notices. Noise complaints. My boat engine disturbed the peace. Allegations of unauthorized dock construction. And my personal favorite, a property tax assessor requesting a routine inspection.
Routine, my ass.
They were hunting for any code violation they could invent. The social warfare turned ugly too. Veronica's book club had apparently made me their favorite topic. I learned that from Betty, Margaret's mother, who cornered me at the grocery store. "That Hartwell woman says you threatened to fence off the whole lake," Betty whispered, looking around nervously. "Says you're having some kind of breakdown since your wife passed." The bitter taste of anger filled my mouth. Using Sarah's death as ammunition crossed a line I didn't even know existed. Thursday evening I'm grilling dinner when 2 police officers knock on my door. Wellness check. Someone reported concerns about my mental state and threats against neighbors. Officer Martinez, no relation to Buck, was polite but thorough.
"Sir, we have to follow up."
Someone reported erratic behavior and statements about restricting community lake access. "Officer, the only erratic behavior around here is someone sabotaging my boat and filing false reports. We understand your frustration, but we need to document you're not a danger to yourself or others." After they left, I sat on my dock watching sunset, feeling more isolated than I had since Sarah's funeral. Veronica was systematically tearing apart my reputation, my peace of mind, and my connection to the only community I'd ever called home. That's when I noticed something important. She'd made a critical mistake in her harassment campaign. Every legal document, every complaint, every committee assumed the HOA had authority over the lake. Not once had anyone verified who actually owned the water. Old engineering instincts kicked in. When you design systems, you always verify assumptions, especially foundational ones. Friday morning found me at the State Historical Society requesting every record tied to the 1954 Crystal Lake Dam project. The librarian, a sharp-eyed woman named Ruth, disappeared into the archives and returned with a banker's box that hadn't been opened in decades. Inside was everything.
Original contracts. Compensation agreements.
Environmental studies from the Eisenhower era. And buried in the middle, like a legal landmine waiting to detonate, was a document that would change everything. A document proving Veronica's entire campaign rested on quicksand.
Saturday morning, 6 a.m.
I'm enjoying crisp autumn air with coffee when I hear heavy trucks rumbling. Through my kitchen window, I watch a convoy pull up at the community center. Morrison and Associates. Lawyers.
Environmental consultants. Even a TV news van.
Veronica had gone nuclear. By noon, a process server delivered a lawsuit thick as a dictionary.
Public nuisance.
Environmental hazard. Seeking $50,000 in damages for reputational harm plus an injunction forcing removal of my boat. The legal language was meant to intimidate, but after 30 years in engineering, I'd read plenty of hostile contracts. What caught my attention wasn't what they claimed, it was what they didn't claim.
No mention of water rights.
No assertion of lake ownership. They were suing me for being a nuisance on my own property without establishing they had standing. That afternoon, Channel 7 News aired a segment. Lake community versus stubborn boat owner. Veronica positioned herself as the environmental champion, standing dramatically at the shoreline with concerned parents as props. 3 neighborhood kids held handmade clean water signs. "We're not anti-boat," she told the reporter in a syrup-smooth voice. "We're pro-environment, pro-safety, pro-community. Mr. Stone's refusal to cooperate leaves us no choice but legal action." The reporter swallowed it whole.
No one contacted me for comment.
Naturally, Monday brought a settlement offer. Richard Hartwell delivered it personally, looking like a man who closed deals by crushing people. "Garrett, let's be reasonable." He stood in my living room surveying my modest furniture with open disdain.
"Move the boat.
Pay our legal fees, call it $10,000, and this ends."
"And if I refuse?"
His smile could have frozen seawater. "Litigation is expensive.
Stressful.
At your age, with your health." He let the threat hang like smoke.
"My health is fine, Richard. For now."
But prolonged legal battles, community hostility, financial strain, those things wear a man down. After he left, I sat on my dock thinking about everything I'd lost.
Sarah. My business.
Most of my old friendships. Was this boat really worth fighting for? Then I remembered something Sarah always said. The moment you stop standing up for what's right is the moment you stop being yourself. Tuesday, the Dirty Tricks campaign went full throttle. My internet mysteriously failed. UPS couldn't locate my address. The hardware store clerk awkwardly claimed they were out of stock on items I could clearly see behind the counter. Veronica was weaponizing her social influence, pressuring every local business dependent on HOA members' money. But she underestimated something crucial. Not everyone in town liked her. Buck Martinez called Wednesday evening, his voice tight with anger. "Garrett, they're trying to pressure me to ban your boat from the marina. Richard threatened to trash my Yelp reviews if I keep servicing you."
"What did you tell him?"
"I told him where he could stick his reviews." "But brother, they're serious. Margaret says the HOA already burned through $15,000 in legal fees, and they're talking about special assessments to fund more." That night I made a decision that would either end this war, or escalate it beyond recognition. Back in the 1990s, I'd helped design a water treatment plant in Montana. That project taught me something vital. Water rights law is older and stronger than almost any property law. When you own water rights, you don't just own water. You own the ecosystem. Thursday morning found me at the county surveyor's office with Ruth from the Historical Society. We spent 4 hours cross-referencing the 1954 dam contracts with modern property maps. What we discovered was breathtakingly simple. The government purchased surface flooding rights from my grandfather, not ownership. They paid him to allow temporary flooding for the dam project. But the water itself, the lakebed, the fish, navigation rights, all remained with the Stone family permanently. The legal implications were enormous. Every dock in Willowbrook Estates sat on my property without permission. Every community swim party or fishing tournament was technically trespassing. The HOA had been collecting dues for lake maintenance on water they had zero legal authority to manage. And suddenly, the entire battlefield shifted. Friday afternoon, I received the most beautiful piece of mail I'd ever laid eyes on. Official confirmation from the State Water Resources Department stating that the Stone family retained full water rights to Crystal Lake in perpetuity, exactly as outlined in the original 1954 compensation agreement. That evening, as the sunset painted the water in molten gold, I couldn't stop myself from smiling. Veronica thought she was battling a stubborn old man with a boat. In reality, she was fighting the legal owner of the entire lake. Saturday morning, I drove to the state capitol with Ruth from the Historical Society riding shotgun. She'd spent most of Friday on the phone with contacts at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and what she uncovered made my hands tremble on the steering wheel. "Garrett, you need to see the original contracts," she said, clutching a manila folder like it contained nuclear codes instead of paperwork. "Not the summaries everyone's been referencing, the actual 1954 documents." The Federal Records Archive building smelled like aged leather and bureaucracy. Ruth guided me through endless corridors lined with filing cabinets stretching to the ceiling, past clerks moving with the slow confidence of people who knew their documents would outlive them. In basement vault B47, we found what we needed. The Crystal Lake Dam project file was 3 inches thick, bound in government green, stamped with approvals from agencies that no longer even existed. I opened it expecting standard property transfer forms. What I found instead changed everything.
Payment authorization, Harold Stone.
Compensation for temporary agricultural land flooding, $12,000.
Temporary. Not permanent. Temporary.
My grandfather hadn't sold the land to the government.
He'd leased it.
Look at Section 4B, Ruth whispered, pointing to a paragraph that would haunt Veronica's sleep for years. Grantaire retains all mineral rights, water navigation rights, and recreational usage rights in perpetuity. Upon completion of dam project, all rights revert to original landowner family with full legal standing. The dam finished construction in 1956. For 68 years, my family had owned not just the water, but the lake bed, the fishing rights, navigation authority, and every structure touching that water, including 24 very expensive private docks. The musty scent of old paper suddenly felt sweeter as I photographed every page. The government had created Crystal Lake on my grandfather's property, paid him rent for the privilege, and somehow everyone forgot the landlord still existed. But it got even better. Ruth flipped to the environmental section, her finger tracing faded 1950s bureaucratic language. The temporary flooding area shall remain under original landowner jurisdiction for all recreational and environmental management purposes. Federal oversight limited to dam maintenance access only. What does that mean in plain English?
I asked.
It means you're not just the owner, Garrett. You're the environmental authority. Every EPA complaint Veronica filed about your boat? She filed it with the wrong jurisdiction. You are the jurisdiction. My phone buzzed with a text from Buck Martinez.
Emergency. HOA meeting tonight.
Veronica says she has final solution to boat problem.
Thought you should know.
I laughed out loud in that basement archive, startling a clerk who probably hadn't heard laughter echo through those halls in decades. Veronica was preparing her final offensive against a man who legally owned the battlefield. The drive home felt surreal. Every tree, every curve in the road, every glimpse of Crystal Lake through autumn leaves looked different now. This wasn't just inherited property anymore. It was my kingdom, complete with residents who'd been paying HOA fees to maintain someone else's lake. Ruth called her contact at the state environmental office from my kitchen table. After 20 minutes of technical conversation, she hung up with a grin that belonged in a shark documentary. The state has no record of water rights transfer for Crystal Lake. As far as they're concerned, it's a private recreational waterway under your environmental management. Every complaint Veronica filed will be forwarded to you for resolution.
You mean?
I mean you're about to become the busiest environmental compliance officer in the county. Population one very angry HOA president who just realized she's been barking up the wrong tree for 6 months. That evening I sat on my dock watching sunset spill across my lake, listening to the distant sounds of Veronica's emergency meeting drifting over the water. Let her plan her final move. I had mine ready too. Monday morning I called Rebecca, a water rights attorney I found through my old consulting network. Her office overlooked the Columbia River, and when I explained everything, her laugh carried the sharp confidence of someone who'd seen David beat Goliath before. Mr. Stone, I've practiced water law for 20 years, and I've never seen a case this clear. Your grandfather was smarter than most attorneys. Rebecca brought in Marcus Thompson, an environmental lawyer specializing in lake management. Together we mapped out a 3-phase strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. Phase 1. Establish my legal authority without revealing the full extent of my rights. Let Veronica keep digging. Phase 2. Document every violation of my property rights, building an airtight harassment case. Phase 3. Offer the community a reasonable settlement protecting my rights while preserving neighborhood harmony. The scratch of pencils across legal pads filled Rebecca's conference room as we calculated damages. That unauthorized community dock, $85,000 construction cost, all on my property. The harassment campaign, medical bills, insurance complications, reputational damage. But the real revelation came when Marcus pulled up environmental regulations. Garrett, as the water rights holder, you're responsible for environmental compliance. Every boat using that lake requires your authorization. Every swim event, every fishing tournament, all need landowner approval. Including HOA activities. Especially HOA activities. They've been operating without permits on private property for 4 years. Tuesday found me at Buck Martinez's marina, recruiting my first ally. Buck had 3 decades of lake experience and zero tolerance for entitled millionaires dictating his livelihood.
What do you need, brother? Documentation.
Every time they pressured you, threatened you, tried controlling lake access, I need witnesses to their harassment pattern. Buck's weathered face split into a grin that would intimidate pirates. Son, I've been keeping records since day one. These folks tried shutting down my family business because we don't fit their country club image. His files were incredible.
Recorded calls.
Threatening letters. Documented attempts to pressure county officials into revoking his permits. 4 years of evidence showing Veronica's group systematically targeting anyone who resisted them. Wednesday brought an unexpected ally. Margaret, the HOA treasurer, knocked on my door at sunset, her hands trembling as she clutched a folder.
Mr. Stone. I can't sleep anymore.
What we're doing to you is wrong. Margaret had quietly documented financial misconduct, HOA dues being spent on legal fees for Veronica's personal vendetta. Community funds paying for private harassment campaigns. Board meetings where members were pressured into compliance. She spent $47,000 of community money on that lawsuit against you. Money meant for road repairs and snow removal. The betrayal in Margaret's voice told me everything. Veronica hadn't just declared war on me. She'd betrayed her own neighbor's trust. Thursday's research session at the county environmental office yielded pure gold. Bureaucrats keep everything, and Crystal Lake's file stretched back to the original environmental impact studies. The 1954 assessment was astonishingly thorough: water quality, fish populations, wildlife habitats, vegetation mapping. Most importantly, it established baseline environmental conditions that the lake now exceeded. Crystal Lake wasn't just clean, it was pristine. Cleaner than when the government first created it. Friday became Technical Education Day. Marcus walked me through the legal framework governing my authority: the Federal Clean Water Act, state recreational waterway regulations, private property environmental management statutes. A complex web of law pointing to one simple truth. I wasn't just the owner. I was the environmental steward, navigation authority, and recreational access controller. Every responsibility Veronica claimed for the HOA legally belonged to me. That evening I spread county survey maps across my kitchen table, marking every dock, access point, and structure touching my water. The crisp sound of pencil on paper matched my growing amazement at the scale of unauthorized development.
24 private docks. A community swimming area. 3 fishing piers. 2 kayak launches. All built without permission from the actual property owner. But revenge wasn't my goal. Resolution was. Sarah always said the best victories were the ones where everyone gained something. So I designed a community access agreement, one protecting my rights while preserving everyone's enjoyment of the lake. Reasonable annual fees tied to property value. Environmental protection standards people could actually follow. A governance structure respecting both private ownership and community interests. Because sometimes the strongest move isn't destroying your opponent. It's reminding them who really owns the board. Saturday night, I called my adult kids to explain everything I'd uncovered. My daughter, Sarah Jr., worked as a paralegal in Seattle. My son, Mike, was in construction up in Portland. Both of them carried their mother's fierce sense of fairness and my grandfather's steady patience. Dad, Sarah Jr. said, you could legally remove all of them from the lake forever if you wanted. I could, I admitted. But that's not who your mother raised me to be. As I prepared for what Buck had started calling the nuclear option, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: a quiet certainty. The kind that comes from knowing you hold every card on the table and still choosing to play with integrity. Sunday morning brought a new low. I stepped outside to find the word polluter spray painted across my garage door in bright red letters. But that wasn't even the worst part. Overnight, someone had dumped used motor oil along my shoreline, creating an environmental nightmare that would photograph perfectly for the evening news. The harsh smell of petroleum mixed with the cool morning mist as I recorded everything on my phone. These people had literally polluted the lake to frame me for pollution. The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't so destructive. By 9 a.m., Veronica was hosting an impromptu press conference at the community dock, my dock, legally speaking. Channel 7 returned, along with a reporter from the environmental blog Green Valley Voice. She stood there in a pristine white pantsuit like some kind of ecological Joan of Arc, pointing dramatically at the oil slick her own people had created. This is exactly what we've been warning about, she announced, her voice carrying across the water. Mr. Stone's reckless boat maintenance is destroying our pristine ecosystem. The reporter nodded sympathetically, scribbling notes about environmental negligence and community danger. Nobody mentioned the oil was still fresh from the night before or that it formed a suspiciously perfect line along my shoreline, exactly where someone would dump it for maximum visual effect. That afternoon brought federal escalation. EPA investigators arrived with badges and serious expressions,
responding to what they described as multiple complaints about ongoing environmental violations. Agent Sarah Willis was professional and methodical, but I could see the doubt in her eyes as she examined the obviously planted evidence. When I showed her security footage of 3 figures in dark clothing dumping oil at 2 a.m., her expression hardened immediately.
Mr.
Stone, this appears to be intentional contamination. Have you had disputes with neighbors recently? You could say that. By Tuesday, Veronica had filed a federal lawsuit claiming my water rights posed a threat to interstate commerce. The theory was absurd. Crystal Lake didn't connect to any navigable waterways, but it bought her headlines and time. Local man claims to own public lake, the newspaper read, featuring a photo of me looking stubborn beside Veronica's carefully staged concerned citizen pose. The harassment was becoming systematic. Richard Hartwell's real estate connections somehow convinced my bank to flag my accounts for suspicious activity. Credit cards started getting declined locally. The post office claimed delivery problems due to safety concerns. Wednesday brought the true nuclear move. Veronica announced plans to have Crystal Lake designated as a federally protected wetland. It was brilliant strategy, weaponizing my love for the lake by potentially making it illegal to use. The heavy dread of bureaucracy settled in my stomach as I read the paperwork. Once federal protections went into place, private property rights could become secondary to environmental regulation. I could technically own the water and still be forbidden from touching it. But Veronica made one critical mistake. She filed the petition using false ownership claims. Federal forms require accurate property declarations, and she swore the HOA held water rights they never possessed. Thursday evening, my phone rang with the call I'd been waiting for. Rebecca's voice carried unmistakable satisfaction. Garrett, Veronica just committed perjury on federal documents. She swore under oath that the HOA owns Crystal Lake water rights.
We've got her.
What's the next move?
I asked. We set the trap.
Let her keep digging while we prepare the evidence that collapses her entire operation. Friday brought the community fracture I'd been expecting. A handwritten note arrived from the Anderson family. Tommy's parents showed up shortly after with apologies for signing Veronica's petition. We were scared, Carol Anderson wrote in shaky script. Scared of the social pressure. Scared of what refusing might cost us. But what they're doing to you isn't right. The quiet rustle of paper filled my kitchen as I read similar letters from 2 other families. Veronica's coalition was cracking from the inside. That weekend I finalized my preparations. Security cameras recorded every visitor, every act of sabotage. Financial documents tracked illegal HOA spending. Environmental reports confirmed the lake's pristine condition despite Veronica's claims. Most importantly, I had something she couldn't fight. The truth, backed by 70 years of government records. Sunday evening, I sat on my dock watching the sunset turn my lake gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation everything had been building toward. Veronica thought she was fighting a stubborn old man with a boat problem. She was about to discover she'd been committing federal crimes against the legal owner of everything she claimed to protect. The gentle sound of waves against the dock felt almost like applause for what was about to happen. Monday morning brought Veronica's final gambit, a restraining order claiming I'd threatened community safety. The sheriff's deputy looked uncomfortable handing me paperwork accusing me of operating my boat dangerously near children and making verbal threats. Pure fiction, but effective legal theater. The temporary order banned me from using my boat until a hearing could be scheduled. Veronica had essentially grounded me on my own lake using the legal system as a weapon. I'm sorry about this, Mr. Stone, Deputy Martinez said quietly, glancing toward the water. I have to serve what the judge signs. Just doing your job, officer.
I understand.
What I understood was that Veronica had just committed perjury again. Tuesday's escalation was staggering. Richard leveraged banking connections to freeze my assets pending investigation of environmental liability claims. Insurance received anonymous hazard reports. A county building inspector arrived determined to find violations. I watched everything unfold with calm detachment, like someone who already knew how the movie ended. The inspector, Jerry Kowalski, Emma's son as it turned out, spent 4 hours examining my property. Mr. Stone, I have to investigate complaints, but your place is solid. Whoever filed these reports either hasn't been here or they're lying.
What kind of complaints?
Illegal dock modifications, unpermitted structures, environmental hazards. Your dock meets every code we've got, and I helped write half of them. Wednesday brought media manipulation at industrial scale. Veronica hired a PR firm to amplify her narrative. Photographers captured staged images of concerned residents near the oil spill her team created. Social media influencers posted about greedy landowners destroying public resources. Camera shutters followed me everywhere in town. I was becoming the villain in a story built entirely on lies. Thursday evening crossed every remaining line. Someone broke into my house while I was at the courthouse and scattered photographs of Sarah across my living room. Pictures from her cancer treatments, her funeral, her memorial. The message was unmistakable. Even my grief wasn't off limits. I sat there surrounded by memories of the woman I'd loved for 28 years and felt something inside me crystallize. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about dignity, respect, basic human decency. But Veronica made a fatal mistake. Breaking into my home was a felony, one her lawyers couldn't spin into civil litigation. Friday brought the final pieces together. Margaret arrived with banker's boxes filled with HOA financial records, her face pale with shock. Garrett, it's worse than I thought. They've been using community funds to hire investigators, pay for social media campaigns, even bribe contractors to refuse you service. We're talking about $60,000 in illegal spending. Documents spread across my kitchen: financial fraud, perjury, harassment, criminal trespass, environmental sabotage. Veronica's campaign had evolved into a documented crime spree. That afternoon, my security cameras captured something incredible. Veronica and Richard themselves planting more evidence along my shoreline, completely unaware they were being recorded in high definition. Saturday morning, I received the call that changed everything. Agent Willis from the EPA had completed her oil spill investigation and reached conclusions that would make Veronica's environmental crusade look like pure theater. Mr. Stone, the contamination was clearly intentional. Saturday night, I called my grown kids to tell them what I'd uncovered. My daughter, Sarah Jr., worked as a paralegal in Seattle. My son, Mike, was in construction down in Portland. Both of them had inherited their mother's sense of fairness and their grandfather's quiet patience. Dad, Sarah Jr. said, you could force every single one of them off that lake permanently if you wanted. I could, I admitted, but that's not the way your mother raised me. As I prepared for what Buck jokingly called the nuclear option, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time.
A calm certainty.
The kind that comes from knowing you hold every card, and still choosing to play with integrity. Sunday morning delivered a new low. I stepped outside and froze. Someone had spray-painted polluter across my garage door in bright red letters. But that wasn't even the worst part. Overnight, someone had dumped motor oil along my shoreline, creating a slick that spread across the water like a staged disaster scene. The sharp chemical smell mixed with the cool morning mist as I documented everything on my phone. They had literally polluted the lake, to accuse me of pollution. The irony might have been funny if it hadn't been so destructive. By 9 a.m., Veronica was hosting an impromptu press conference down at the community dock. Channel 7 was back, along with a reporter from the environmental blog Green Valley Voice. She stood there in a pristine white pantsuit, posing like some kind of ecological martyr, gesturing dramatically toward the oil slick her own people had created. This is exactly what we've been warning about, she announced, her voice carrying across the water. Mr. Stone's reckless boat maintenance is destroying our pristine lake ecosystem. The reporter nodded sympathetically, scribbling notes about environmental damage and negligence. No one mentioned that the oil still looked fresh. No one pointed out that it formed a perfect line along my property, exactly where someone would dump it for maximum visual effect. That afternoon, things escalated federally. EPA investigators arrived with badges and serious expressions, responding to multiple complaints about environmental violations. Agent Sarah Willis was professional and methodical, but I could see the doubt in her eyes as she examined what was clearly planted evidence. When I showed her security footage of 3 figures in dark clothing dumping oil at 2 a.m., her demeanor shifted instantly. Mr. Stone, she said, this appears to be intentional contamination. Have you had conflicts with neighbors? You could say that. By Tuesday, Veronica had filed a federal lawsuit claiming my water rights threatened interstate commerce. The argument was absurd. Crystal Lake didn't connect to any navigable waterways, but it bought her headlines. Local man claims to own public lake. The newspaper photo showed me looking stubborn while Veronica posed as a concerned citizen. The harassment had become coordinated. Richard Hartwell's real estate company somehow convinced my bank to flag my accounts for suspicious activity. Credit cards started getting declined. The post office claimed they couldn't deliver mail due to safety concerns. Wednesday brought her so-called nuclear option. Veronica announced she was petitioning to have Crystal Lake declared a federally protected wetland. It was a clever move. Use my love for the lake against me by making it illegal to use. The cold dread settled in my stomach as I read the paperwork. Once federal protection kicked in, private property rights often became secondary. I could legally own the lake, and still be forbidden from touching it. But Veronica made a critical mistake. She filed the petition using false ownership claims. Federal forms required accurate property records, and she'd sworn the HOA held water rights they never possessed. Thursday evening, my phone rang. Rebecca's voice carried the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd found the perfect trap. Garrett, she just committed perjury on federal documents. She swore the HOA owns Crystal Lake water rights.
We've got her. What's our move?
We let her keep digging, I said. Then we drop everything at once. Friday brought the fracture I'd been expecting. Tommy Anderson's parents showed up with a handwritten apology for signing Veronica's petition.
We were afraid, Carol wrote. Afraid of the pressure.
Afraid of what refusing would cost us. But watching what they're doing to you, this isn't who we want to be. More letters followed from other families. Veronica's coalition was cracking. That weekend, I finalized preparations. Security cameras captured everything. Financial records documented misuse of HOA funds. Environmental reports confirmed the lake's pristine condition. And most importantly, I had the truth. Backed by 70 years of documentation. Sunday evening, I sat on my dock watching the sunset turn the water gold. Tomorrow would be the confrontation. Veronica thought she was fighting a stubborn old man with a boat. She was about to discover she'd spent 6 months committing federal crimes against the legal owner of everything she claimed to protect. The gentle waves against the dock sounded almost like applause. Monday morning brought her final move, a restraining order claiming I threatened community safety. The deputy looked embarrassed serving it.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stone.
I just serve what the judge signs.
I understand, I told him.
What I understood was that she'd committed perjury again. Tuesday's escalation was breathtaking. 3 banks froze my assets. Insurance received anonymous complaints. The county inspector arrived looking for violations. Inspector Jerry Kowalski spent 4 hours examining everything. Mr. Stone, he finally said, your place is solid. Whoever filed these complaints is lying. Wednesday brought media manipulation at full scale.
Veronica hired a PR firm.
Photographers staged concerned citizen shots near the oil slick. Social media influencers pushed narratives about corporate polluters. I was becoming the villain in a story built on lies. Thursday night crossed every line. Someone broke into my house and scattered photos of Sarah across the living room. Cancer treatments, hospital days, her funeral. Even my grief wasn't off limits. Sitting there, surrounded by memories, something hardened inside me. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about dignity. And Veronica had just committed felony burglary. Friday, Margaret arrived with boxes of HOA financial records. Garrett, it's worse than we thought. They spent $60,000 on investigators, PR campaigns, even bribes to contractors to refuse you service.
Financial fraud, perjury, harassment, trespass, environmental destruction.
A documented crime spree. That afternoon, security cameras captured Veronica and Richard planting more evidence along my shoreline. High-definition footage.
Clear faces.
Saturday morning, Agent Willis called. Mr. Stone, the contamination was intentional. Multiple oil sources dumped for visual effect. We're recommending federal charges.
Against whom?
We're still investigating. But someone's going to prison. Sunday evening, I sat on my dock knowing the storm was coming.
Monday night, Town Hall.
The Willowbrook Community Center buzzed like a championship game.
200 residents.
3 news crews. Government officials everywhere. I arrived early carrying a simple manila folder containing enough legal dynamite to destroy Veronica's entire operation. She entered like a victorious general, white suit, confident smile, reporters trailing. For 20 minutes, she painted me as an environmental villain.
Charts. Photos. Concerned parents. Kids holding signs.
The crowd murmured approval. Then Commissioner Walsh called on me. I stood slowly. I have a simple question, I began. Who owns Crystal Lake?
Silence.
I held up the 1954 Army Corps of Engineers contract. My grandfather, Harold Stone, was paid for temporary flooding. Water rights remained with the Stone family, permanently. Gasps filled the room. Agent Sarah Willis confirmed federal recognition. Rebecca confirmed state documentation. Veronica's face drained of color. Deputy Martinez stood. Veronica Hartwell, you're under arrest for criminal trespass, environmental vandalism, and filing false reports.
Handcuffs clicked. Cameras flashed.
Her empire collapsed in real time. But I wasn't finished. As legal owner, I announced, I'm establishing the Crystal Lake Conservation Trust. $50,000 for environmental protection and community access. In one sentence, I went from villain to benefactor. 3 months later, the lake looked the same, but felt different. Veronica pleaded guilty. Richard faced fraud charges.
The corrupt HOA dissolved.
Margaret became president of a new voluntary association. The Conservation Trust grew to $125,000.
Scholarships.
Research partnerships.
Education programs.
Sarah Jr. moved back to help run it. Bucks Marina thrived with a formal lease. Tommy, now 12, learned boat maintenance. Our environmental festival drew 800 people. Businesses prospered. Former enemies apologized. Sarah's boat became a teaching vessel for kids. I even started dating again, Elena Vasquez, a retired teacher who understood loss and healing. Last week, a homeowner from Colorado called for advice about HOA harassment. I helped him the same way others helped me. That's the real victory. Not just winning, but helping others win too. Tonight, I'm sitting on my dock with coffee, listening to loons across the water, thinking about Sarah and how proud she'd be. We turned conflict into community. So here's my challenge to you: share your HOA nightmare in the comments. You're not alone.
Knowledge is power. Patience is strength.
And sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what they tried to destroy. Hit subscribe and the bell. More stories are coming. Because justice served with patience tastes sweeter than any quick revenge.